See, you got to turn the mic on. I got it. You got to turn the mic on. Remember that live stream I did a long time ago there? I went about 3 minutes into the thing, never turned the mic on. I'm going to start this over. We're going to go right back to the, yep, audio. You can hear me now. I think it should be working. According to my levels up there on the screen on this software, it seems to be working. But what I was pointing out was I have my Kool-Aid. I was making Kool-Aid, right? That's the reason we're getting started right at the 7 o'clock minute there, 7:01. But Kool-Aid in a Dunkin' Donuts mug, courtesy of one of our meet and greeters, a present. I got my meet and greet Death by Bunjie, second ever Death by Bunjie meet and greet shirt on. And I'm ready to do a live stream tonight and talk about stuff that I've been thinking about for a long time. I have been thinking about arrows for quite a while and crossbows. And I was itching to get out there and shoot again today, but we couldn't shoot today because Genevieve and I were filming the videos for the upcoming meet and greet videos. We were recording the interview part for her boar hunt. And that video is now, there's a rough cut of it. It'll be up this week, promise you. It'll be up this week. That's my plan. And it'll be up and it'll be fun, and I think you guys will get a kick out of it. I'm hoping we can do like a premiere on Thursday night. You'll get to see it for the first time. Genevieve will get to see the final copy, the final cut for the first time. We'll sit in here with my wife and my daughter. We'll sit in here and watch it. We'll watch it with you as a premiere like Thursday evening or so. That is the plan. How great is that? We got all kinds of folks on here. I want to say hello to you guys. We got George Keith. Todd, you're here. Carl Powers, good to hear from you. Frank Bruner, we've got Lever Action back with us, and Jennifer Robinson. Hello to you. Ha back. We got all kinds of good stuff going on here. Hello to Pittsburgh, Greg. Good to have you on here. A whole bunch of names that I recognize. Gary Rieger, you and I talked by email, I think, here not too long ago. Going back and forth. We got some neat stuff going on, and I think we've got an interesting topic tonight. Crossbow arrows. In particular, what was our thumbnail? Let's go back to that. I'll turn off the music. I'm going to turn off the music, not because I don't like that song. I really do like that song. That song's great. I wrote that song. I like that song. Ode to the Red Spotted Newt. It's the Newt song, as noted in the comments. But the big question today, the big question for you and for me as crossbow hunters is, does your crossbow moose? I'm already drinking my Kool-Aid. I'm going to be out of Kool-Aid by the time this is over with. But does your crossbow moose? I'm going to tell you right now, the answer to that question is probably yes. It probably does. But I'm going to talk to you about what that means, or what I think it means. And I'm going to talk to you about what you can do to make sure that your crossbow mooses. And you're probably thinking, Rich, what on earth are you talking about? I don't want to hunt moose. And that's fine. You don't have to hunt moose. You don't have to hunt moose in order to have a crossbow that mooses. Moose is a term Genevieve and I have been throwing around. And yes, I got gone back and forth on Facebook with a couple of people, and I just got a kick out of it. We were laughing. We said we're going to get t-shirts made that ask whether or not your crossbow mooses. That's going to be our new catchphrase going into the season 7 of Death by Bunjie on YouTube. It's going to be, does your crossbow moose? Like a very important question. And what it means, just to hit it, to tell you what this means. What does it mean to moose? And what I'm going to do, I'll share with you what we're talking about here. This is a picture of the Realtree website, realtree.com, I think it is. But to be honest with you, I don't remember what the web address is. I just type in on my phone or on the computer. I type in Google. I type arrow momentum calculator. Realtree arrow momentum calculator. Kaboom. There it is. You get this sort of a website that comes up. And Lever Action, thank you very much for the super chat. You guys are the best. I get these super chats, and I say this every time, and I do mean it. I greatly appreciate it because it helps me buy coffee, or in this case, fill up my Dunkin' Donuts mug, and it keeps me running on Dunkin' and or Kool-Aid. That's pretty much all I drink. But it does help, and I do appreciate it. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness. And I appreciate just the mere fact that you're here, though. So don't feel compelled to do the super chats. Certainly don't turn them away, and I do appreciate them. But I also appreciate your presence on these live streams and you watching the videos. And I appreciate the dozens and dozens and dozens of conversations that I have on a daily basis with folks about crossbows. I do my best to keep up with them. This time of year, it's pretty busy, but I do my best to keep up with them. I respond to the comments best I can and do all that good stuff. The Realtree website, I really think that's a cool little website, though. And the reason I say that is you have this website where you can type in your arrow specifics, the weight of your arrow, the grains, and that includes your broadhead. Now, it says here that it must be between 250 and 750 grains. That's just to keep it, oops, sorry. I was trying to go back to my webcam. But that, if you look at that, it has to be between 250 and 750 grains. I screwed up my joke there by clicking on the wrong thing. The reason it is between 250 and 750 grains is because they want to keep it legal. I'm just kidding. I don't know of any state that measures grains and says you have to have a certain weight of arrow to hunt with to keep it legal. But that might be the case. You always got to check those regulations. You can't be too safe on this stuff. So check out that stuff. I think for the most part, you would like to make sure that you got legal stuff. But I think the 250 to 750 is just the way their website works. I don't think it has anything to do with whether or not, those arrows exist. There are people shooting arrows in excess of 750 grains. And I can tell you, I've had conversations at the meet and greet with someone telling me that there probably were arrows under 250, which is just crazy. But I'm not into that either. But, this is how you put that in there to make these calculations. Isn't that neat? We can also go, though, and fill in our arrow speed. Now, the arrow speed's important. You're going to need a chronograph with that, but if you want to play around with this and have fun with this website, you do not need to have a chronograph necessarily. Now, to show you what happens on this website, you type in your arrow weight. Now, Genevieve, for example, I'm just going to type in off the top of my head what she's using. She is using a 265 grain arrow. It's, I think, 262. I'm going to go back to the webcam just briefly, and we're getting to what the definition of moose is. We'll get to that, okay? But if I look at these arrows, these are not her arrows. These are my arrows. Her little tiny quiver with her little quills. These are actually not the quills. They're the pro flights. But they're different lengths because they have been broken, and a whole story behind that when we get to the meet and greet videos this week. But right here, if I can wrestle this out of here with this broadhead, look at this beast, huh? Look at that monster. That's the Rage Tripan that Genevieve uses, the Crossbow Tripan. That is a mean broadhead. It is a beautiful broadhead. I really like it, and I'm kind of jealous. But 150 grain broadhead, and she is shooting that out of these Pro Flight arrows. These Pro Flight arrows, 16.5-inch arrow, which is what the Excalibur 355 suppressor shoots, 16.5-inch arrow. Arrow alone, 262 grains, broadhead 150. Now, this is where it gets tricky, and I can tell you it's around 412 or something, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but just to make sure that I am not misquoted here, and I'm going to go with 265 for the arrow because of the amazing Luminoc, the Burt Coyote Luminoc that is touched on the end there. So I'm going to put 265 because I think when I weighed them they were around that, plus the 150, and on my little calculator I get 415. 415 is the number we're dealing with. Okay, that's where we're starting. So we're going to go back to our website, the Realtree website. We're going to go to arrow weight 415, which, there you go. That's a pretty good number, right? And then we're going to go down to our speed, because we're doing a total arrow weight. We're talking about the grains. We want to calculate the overall math of what we're throwing at the animal. It doesn't make sense to calculate it. I don't really care what it would be like just throwing the broadhead at the animal. You want to know the broadhead plus the arrow. So we'll go back on there. We got the 415. Now I can tell you from my calculations with this that she's shooting, I think we averaged around 351 with her crossbow with a 150 grain broadhead. And when we hit the button and we generate the momentum, wow, look at that. It gives us a moose. It gives us a moose. So that's cool. And that is where Genevieve and I came up with the term moose. Because if you go and look at that, now I'm going to go to our printouts of our moose printouts. And I'm going to get rid of the other ones because for a minute there I almost gave away where the story is going. But this is kind of a neat topic, okay? Here's your moose printout. And basically, if you read it, it says this setup is suitable for a moose. It throws heavy arrows. Strong fixed blade broadhead. It will work on any game animal on the planet. Wait, strong fixed blade broadhead? What kind of gibberish? No. What kind of propaganda is this? But anyway, but that's what it says. Okay, there you're looking at the kinetic energy, 112 plus. The momentum, 0.642. Real good numbers there. That is her stock setup. Now, I want to be clear. That is actually what Excalibur recommends, because they recommend a 150 grain broadhead be used with the ProFlight 16.5-inch arrows. You do get a benefit from that greater front of center, from having a little bit more weight up front. That's why they're doing that. And this broadhead, incidentally, has been through an animal already at the Death by Bunjie meet and greet, and I will show you how that looks. It's been cleaned up. Now, I don't reuse these. We don't make a habit of doing that. But I will tell you, you probably could get away with it. It's in pretty good shape. Maybe you replace the blades. That ferrule, not ferrule, the ferrule, I'm making fun of that in a video coming up this week, too. You'll get a kick out of that. But the ferrule's in good shape, and boy, I'll go through another animal just fine. But look at that nice big cut. I really like these broadheads, right? And when you open them up all the way, that's how it would go through the animal. But get those kind of out of the way so I don't hurt myself. I always end up with little cuts on my fingers as a result of this. But that is the recommended overall arrow setup for Excalibur when you look at their website for those arrows for these micro crossbows, what have you. They do recommend the 150 grain broadhead. And I really like those Rage Tripans. I really do. So the question of whether it mooses or not, that's where Genevieve and I came up with this. And here's the difference, okay? And the reason that I say, does your crossbow moose? The answer is probably yes. The reason I say that is, take your own numbers, go plug them in here, and see what happens. Now, if you have an older, slower crossbow like I do, like Bunjie, you're probably not going to get those numbers, at least not right off the bat. You're not going to get that kinetic energy probably with a 300 feet per second crossbow. But hers is shooting 350, right? 360 without all the, with a 100 grain broadhead, she's at like 360. But with a 150 grain broadhead, she's right there in the moose. Now, and I can also tell you that when you shoot her crossbow, this arrow, if I were to take this arrow and run it through a chronograph with a 100 grain broadhead instead of the 150, her numbers still end up moose. They aren't quite as impressive. I mean, the slugs isn't the same, the momentum's not the same, but she's still in the moose category. She's still going through a moose. She's still going to kill a moose with proper broadhead, proper shot. So that's pretty cool. That's kind of where you want to be. And the reason I think if you go and looking for this stuff, go out there and check out your crossbow, run some specs through there. If you have a chronograph, that's the best. Use that chronograph, shoot through that thing, test your arrows at different weights, different arrows, different broadheads, different field point weights. And once you've got that information, write it all down and sort of measure it. You can run it through that Realtree calculator. You can run it through that online. And you can see if you also are in the moose category. And you'll know right off the bat if you are. Now, what happens if you're not? Not the end of the world. Lots of other animals in the world to shoot. But the key about that is, like it says, it's ready. It will work on any big game animal on the planet. And I get the allure, I get the interest in being in that category. That's pretty cool. Now, if we go to, I want to show you this. There's Genevieve's. I moved it off to the side. I think that's where we were at. This is a previous calculation I had run through, but that's the 112 kinetic energy, foot-pounds, right? We measure the momentum in slugs. That's how it's determined, 0.642. I want to compare that with my stock off-the-shelf arrows. Now, the stock off-the-shelf arrows, right out of the box, Bunjie's 2010 Excalibur Axiom, and as such, shoots these arrows. They're 20 inches. This is an upgraded arrow, actually, but the same weight. It's a Firebolt from Easton. Easton made these ones. There's your logo. I like the logos. They're always cool to see. But this one with a 100 grain broadhead is 285 grains here, 385 with that guy in there. So we're approximately at that. A little bit extra with the Luminoc, that kind of thing. And if you don't want the extra weight, just take the battery out of the Luminoc, right? That doesn't make much sense. But you could do that, I suppose, if you're really picky about stuff. But anyway, I like the Luminocs. I do. I like lighted Nox. In fact, I have half a mind to start testing different types of lighted Nox. I do enjoy them. 100 grain broadhead. But that thing, right out of the box, here's our numbers, okay? Now we're going back. There's Genevieve on the left. Hers will stay up on the left because that's your modern crossbow. That is representative of your modern crossbow. stock off the shelf. Look at these numbers. Woohoo! That's your 385 grains in arrow speed, 300 feet per second or so with Bunjie out of the box. It's 305 or so, but I think I hit 305. I have run that through a chronograph, and I think I hit 305 one time. Most of the time it was an average of 300 to 302 was the average I was getting stock, the way it came, the way that it came right out of the box, and with those arrows. So that's what you can expect with the Axiom, for example, with my old crossbow. But I want to see how that changes, and we're going to play around with this. Now, remember that back in the day I went through and added all that quieting gear to sort of reduce the vibration, reduce the volume of the crossbow, because out of the box, that crossbow is so loud. It's just vibration, and it's just very sharp, a very harsh sound. Added a bunch of rubber stirrups. You got stuff on, I got the rubberized stirrup. I got the stuff on going around the good old limb saber type contraptions. I had the X shocks on there. The X shocks blew off like in one outing, although I have managed to glue Genevieve's X shocks on, and those stay on because I glued them on with goat tough glue, and we left them on there for 48 hours before we fired the crossbow. Is what it is. It's working great, so I'm not complaining about that. With my batteries on there, with my the little fingers on there and all that stuff, without the X shocks, you take those off, take the string stars off. But with the big rubber fingers on the limbs, I was down to around 290 on a good day. That'd be about the highest I would be. Now look what that does for it. Boom, right there is my calculations. And I did have a question in here about slugs. Two questions that I see here. What does slugs mean? Slugs is just a measurement, sort of like foot-pounds is the measurement for kinetic energy. Momentum is measured with slugs. It is just the word that we use to compare and give meaning to and identify what you see on the screen here, which is the .642 on one hand with Genevieve's crossbow, a good representative of a modern crossbow. Probably speed-wise, the lower end of your modern crossbows, but still representative of a modern crossbow. And on the right is the old classic Bunjie, the .496. The website that we're looking at, too, because we got that, that's what you go and look at. That is realtree.com. I just Google Realtree Arrow Momentum Calculator. Now, if you look at this dude right here, what's the big difference here? We see the difference in the numbers, but are you noticing another big difference here? One of these arrow configurations, one of these crossbows does in fact not moose. In fact, it doesn't even elk. Remember before I had an elk. My crossbow didn't moose out of the box, but it elked. And now it only white-tailed deers. Look how puny that looks compared to the moose. This is why Genevieve and I got such a kick out of this and why we've been playing around with this terminology. But you ain't going to moose when you can only white-tailed deer. So we're not getting the same amount of penetration. We're not getting the same amount of momentum, not getting the same numbers, but it's still kind of a kick to to look at this. So we're not over 300. We're in the 125 to 199. But if you look at this, that's a pretty sweet comparison, and it shows you where we're at. Now, what we've done, do you remember? And you probably do. If you remember, if you've been watching Death by Bunjie, if you've been paying attention on the Facebook page, I've overwhelmed you with my appreciation for arrows such as these. And this, my friends, was the arrow of choice for the second ever Death by Bunjie meet and greet, the famed Spinal Tap. These are a very heavy arrow configuration. And these dudes used the Rage Crossbow hypodermic. That's what I used. And right there is my 2-inch cut that I got out of my Rage Crossbow hypodermic. That's the broadhead. That is a broadhead that's been cleaned up that actually went through my wild boar. It did. This one, actually this one went through the wild boar. The other one did not go through the wild boar. The other arrow is right here. And that one broke because, and you'll have to wait for the videos. I don't want to spoil the videos. But that one broke off. But I still have it. They're pretty neat. Pretty nifty little contraptions here. But look at that's the broadhead. The broadhead, it held up pretty good. It's a 100 grain broadhead. But I should do a whole section on broadheads. We could spend all day talking about that stuff. But Genevieve's broadhead, when I saw hers, I will tell you, and I don't want this to be lost on you, because when they talk about the broadheads, there is a lot that goes into broadheads and a lot of considerations here, right? But one of the things I like about Genevieve's, and this is after it's all opened up, but this is mine fully opened, okay? If you push back on it, look at the difference in these two a little bit. If I can get them here, this is really not the best video platform to do it. But look at that. One of the things I try to point out in this stuff is we can talk about science all day long, but I don't think you need to know an awful lot of science to be able to say that probably this guy right here is going to go through an animal easier than this guy. This one's a pretty, not a very wide cut, wide angle. This one here, this one does not have a steep angle. This one seems like it would be easier to penetrate. So to me, I'm actually considering switching to the tripans. We're not there yet. And I have packages of crossbow hypodermics to use up, and I love those hypodermics. You saw videos last year, 2 years in a row I've used those. The wounds that I've gotten are just fantastic. I love it. So that's where we're at with those. But I do want to talk, when we're talking about penetration on an older, slower crossbow, it becomes crucial that we talk about such things and give them consideration and start giving them meaning. But I don't know that we need to get hung up on science necessarily when it's just might be common sense. That might be enough. Anyway, so that was what we got off with all that quieting gear. Now, remember those fancier arrows? When I plugged that in, wow. Now, a few observations here. Bunjie mooses, right? That's the first big observation. Bunjie mooses. That's pretty good for old Bunjie. And again, if you're just joining us, the crossbow on the left here is Genevieve's. That's pretty representative of a modern crossbow. 351 feet per second. You can see it there along with 412 grain arrow. Just a 16.5-inch little arrow, but it generates that much momentum and it puts her in the moose category. For me, on the right, with those heavy arrows, that's a 100-grain broadhead, 427 grains overall arrow weight, 267 feet per second, and kaboom, we are in the moose category, 0.625 slugs. Nowhere near as much kinetic energy, but there are two observations I would make about that right off the top of my head. One is, there's nothing you're going to do with my 300 feet per second crossbow to give it the amount of kinetic energy that you get with a 350 feet per second crossbow. Old Bunjie is not going to generate the same level of kinetic energy. It's not going to happen. Secondly, kinetic energy is great to open up these broadheads, but after you make impact, the momentum takes over, and that's really what we're looking at. So if we're looking for penetration, kinetic energy gets us there. It opens up your broadhead. You don't have to worry about them opening up. If you're using mechanical broadheads, they're going to open up. They're going to have enough kinetic energy to open up, I should say, on an animal. But it's the question of the momentum, and that's why when we go back here, that you look at the number of slugs, the amount of momentum, I'm kind of in the ballpark of Genevieve there with her faster crossbow, with her stock arrow, with her recommended arrow. Now, what happens, and this is where the stuff gets fun, we now can moose, right, with Bunjie. What happens if we put a 150 grain broadhead, or field point in this case, on those same arrows? What happens if I take this spinal tap, 427 grains or so, and I'm doing this off memory, so don't quote me on these numbers, and my numbers really don't matter for anything more than your, my numbers matter for illustration purposes, so you can get an idea. What really matters is your numbers, right? But what if I were to replace this crossbow hypodermic, this beautiful broadhead? Boy, I love those things. What if I were to replace that? Ooh, don't say it isn't so. Say it isn't so. What if I were to replace it, though, with one of these mean guys? Okay, the 150 grainer. What if I took this guy off? If I took this off and replaced it with this and went up to 150 grains, what happens there if I'm still using that heavy arrow? In other words, I go from 588 grains or something like that. I have the exact number on here. Here's your moose printout. Kaboom. Are you ready? That's with the 100 grain broadhead. But what if I do it with a 150 grain broadhead? Now look. Now who's moosing? Huh? Look at that. All of a sudden, old Bunjie on the right at 0.643 slugs beats Genevieve by 0.001 slugs. That makes absolutely no difference, that 0.001 to the moose. I am sure, but it puts you up in the momentum category of the fast crossbow. Just illustrating this, how cool is that? And it makes a big difference to me to be .001 when you're trying to compete with your daughter here, okay? Don't get hung up on numbers like that for that reason. But isn't that cool? Now, if you look at that, now here's the downside to that. And I want to be clear about the downside. I will explain why to me, this is a downside. It is not a downside. 251 feet per second. That's the arrow speed. I am down to 251 feet per second. I am 100 feet per second slower than my daughter's crossbow, but producing more momentum. That's astounding. Okay? I can get penetration in the ballpark of my daughter's faster, more modern crossbow with my really old 11-year-old, 10-year-old crossbow, 10 years old, starting its 11th hunting season. I can do that, but I'm down to 251 feet per second. Why does that matter? It matters. I've done videos on why I don't think crossbows and high-speed crossbows are the be-all, end-all of crossbows. That's not the case, and I'm not suggesting that. I think the difference between 250 and 350 isn't going to make much difference in terms of the deer jumping the string. It will make some difference. There's a Dr. Grant Woods video where he talks about that, and they did some pretty good tests to illustrate that. So there is a difference there, but that's not necessarily my concern. I shoot 20 yards, maybe 30 yards. I've shot 35 on a deer one time, worked out okay, no big deal. And I shot a boar at 30 yards. But most of my shots, because I prepare my outings in advance, I have a strategy in advance. Most of my shots are 20 yards or less. My shortest shot was 8 yards. Somebody was bragging to me once about their long shots, and his record was 60 yards. And I said, oh, my record is 8 yards. And hopefully one day I'll break that and get down to 5 yards. But it's my way of thinking about this. I still want the archery experience of being up close. If I wanted to shoot something at 60 to 100 yards, I'd be using a rifle. I mean, I used to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. That's not my big bag. That's not my bag. But, to each his own. Hunt your own way. Hunt your own personality. That's what I say. Now, but there we are. The 251. Here's the reason that I don't like the 251. That I'm uncomfortable with the 251. And I just want to be clear about what that is. The reason is. Because I think this is relevant. It might be relevant to some of you. My scope, I like hunting with a 10-yard, 20-yard, 30-yard reticle, 40-yard reticle. And I sight out to 40 yards. I take shots at 50 every once in a while. But to me, the hunting ranges need to be dead on at 10, 20, 30, 40 yards. The speed ring on my scope allows me to dial it in, so that is the case. If I'm down to 251 feet per second with that 150 grain broadhead, that won't work. It will not work on that scope. I will be dead on at 20. I can sight it in for 20. That's not a problem. But 30 is going to be off. 30 will never be 30. 30 is going to be 28 or something like that. And then 40 is going to be 35. And I don't want to go tinkering with that because it's not the way that I hunt. The crossbow has to accommodate me and the way that I have traditionally hunted with it. That's my opinion. It isn't my job to accommodate the crossbow. Don't let Bunjie hear me say that, okay? But Bunjie's here to make me happy. So, again, don't tell anybody I said that. Don't let them know I said that. So there we go. There we go. That's the reason I'm trying to... Now, the scope, I use a Twilight DLX scope. That wants to be 300 to 400 feet per second crossbows, right? Well, you're not getting that for me. So, for me, it's worked just fine at 280. But when I start going below 280, it'll be close. It'll be good out to 30. But if I go too far below 280, that scope is not going to work the same way. I can't dial it the same way. So that's why I got to tinker with this stuff. I am not a big tinkerer. I have said that before. But this is why I'm playing with these numbers. I'm trying to bring you up to speed here. And I hope I'm not boring you guys. I hope that this is pretty good. I hope you're getting something out of this, and it's kind of interesting. But anyway, boy, those are impressive numbers. Now, what happens with our newer set of, when we use those newer set of arrows that I've been trying? These aren't newer arrows. They're just newer arrows for you in the kingdom of Bunjie, but I've been sharing them with you online. But those main hunters, and this arrow, I got to tell you, the Spinal Taps have a cool logo and a cool name, but Main Hunter, I mean, this one wins the logo wars, okay? And Doom, where is that? Over here. Doom, that's quite the name, right? Doom for whom? That's what I was saying on the one live stream. I mean, I hope it's Doom for someone other than me and Bunjie, but they performed well. They're real tight groups. I've been shooting them. Everybody got a chance to see that stuff. Real good stuff. I did replace the Luminox on here, putting Luminox in them, and I'm starting to rob Luminox from Genevieve's arrows because she doesn't like she likes them, but she prefers the green to orange. So I'm going to slowly harvest her Luminox, keep those for me because I like the orange, and then she's going to get the green ones. This is the kind of stuff that I've been talking to my daughter about, and it is the greatest thing to me to be able to share this with her because she's getting a real kick out of it. And this whole concept of moosing, right, has been something that she and I came up with and been joking about. And it's great to be able to share that with you too. So hopefully you're not bored by this stuff. I hope you're enjoying this stuff as much as I am. But the main hunters, these are a little bit heavier. They're heavier than our standard. They're heavier than this dude, right? The Easton, the Firebolt. They're heavier than that. They are lighter, however, which almost everything on the planet is lighter than the spinal taps. I'm just kidding. It's not that bad. But these are really, if you're looking at heavy arrows, this is the kind of thing you'll end up with. The front of center on this is extreme and all that kind of stuff. So these are really not super extreme, but it's right up there. It's really incredible. So these are less, though. These were weighing in around 338 or so is what I was getting, I think. And I'm doing this off the top of my head. What you're going to see for numbers here is more accurate than my memory. But 338 plus the 100 grain, and we got the sweet little Luminox on there. So, yeah, it was somewhere around there. That's what we were getting with these. Now, what do these do? Will they moose? That's the question. They're main hunter, and they have a bear on them. So they might, in fact, bear, but can they moose or can they only elk? That is going to be the question here, right? So we're going to go on the old Realtree calculator. Actually, I'm just going to go to the printouts that I already did. The printouts that I already did. Genevieve on the left. That is Bunjie Jr., 112.69, a .642 slugs. Getting all of that at 351 feet per second, 412 grain arrow combo. Stock stuff right off the shelf like you might experience with your relatively modern crossbow. With mine and the main hunters, kaboom. Now, the main hunters with the 100 grain broadhead, 282 feet per second, 438 grains. That is 77.3 foot-pounds, momentum of 0.54. Now, a couple of observations here. The kinetic energy, nowhere near what Genevieve's going to get, but I am not going to reach that with that old slow crossbow. It's not going to happen. You folks shooting the modern crossbows, that's an embarrassing number. You're probably looking at it and say, man, why are you doing that to yourself? Get a new crossbow. I get that. Totally do. I'm right there with you. I wrote a book. I don't know if you knew that. I wrote a book called The Death by Bunjie Crossbow Story, Confessions of a Crossbow Hunter. And I talk about that in that book. You should read that book and you'll know what I think on that subject. And it might not be what you think I think on that subject, if that makes any sense. But back to our printouts and the subject of this overall video. That .548 is pretty good by Bunjie standards. And it's not too far off the mark of where we were before. If we look back now, we're not going to get up here. We were at .625, right? This was with the spinal taps and 100 grain broadhead. But if you look at the stock off the shelf, we're at .513. By increasing the arrow to these main hunters, we're up to .548. That's a much more respectable level. But what if I were to take these main hunters and go up to a 150 grain broadhead? That's what you're wondering, right? I don't know if you're wondering that or not. But kinetic energy 78, momentum 0.585. Not too shabby. This is the main hunter, 488 grain arrow, 150 grain broadhead, arrow speed 270 feet per second, momentum 0.585. That combo, we're kind of in the ballpark, right? That's my main hunter here. That's the main hunter these beautiful arrows. And these main hunters, I didn't mention it on here, but I did a couple of cool videos. I think they were cool. Live streams earlier this week and videos talking about them. They were a gift from Alex Kurashev from Russia. He is an American, and he's been to Russia and he's from Russia and all that. But goes over there and he brings back these arrows. And they're a real stout arrow. I really like them. Same diameter, by the way. I had that question earlier. They're identical in size to the other arrows that I use. Fletching, the vanes choice is a little different. It is what it is. But they performed very nice just out in the yard. I took 6 arrows. They all shot identical. That was great. But if I were to put a 150 grain broadhead like this beauty on there, dare I do that? Ooh, I don't know. That's so big. But if I were to put this guy on there, that's the tripan. If I put that on there, then that is what would generate 270 feet per second. It would generate 270 feet per second, 488 grains, but it would generate 0.585 slugs. Puts me similar to the category. It's not the same as these are on the right hand side now you see the spinal taps, right? We're not in that category, but we are healthy compared to stock off the shelf or above that, the 0.513, and we are in the moose category. It mooses. So that is the roundabout way of saying that if I were to play around with these main hunter arrows, if I put a 150 grain broadhead on this arrow, shoot it out of Bunjie at 270 feet per second, it does, in fact, moose. How's that? Well, that's all I had for the presentation. This is what Crossbow Appreciation Month is all about to me. It's a chance to be, I know it's a little corny, all this stuff, but I think this is pretty funny, and I think it was cool, and I hope you got something out of that. And I welcome your feedback, too. Please send me emails, deathbybunjie.com. Next Saturday, I'm going to go through the comments here, and we'll talk a little bit. But, next Saturday, we're going to have that Zoom meeting. And if you go to deathbybunjie.com, if you were to do that, and if you typed in your address and got an email address on there, you would be able to take part in that Zoom meeting. And that Zoom meeting is free, just like the email newsletter is, right? It's all free. I'm not going to charge you for that stuff. You got to pay Amazon for the book, but that's about it. And I think if you were to do that, I'm hoping that we will have a fun time on that Zoom meeting, and we can all get on there and share our crossbow stories. Now, you know my crossbow story. Right there it is, the Death by Bunjie crossbow story. That's my book on Amazon.com. And that book is my crossbow story. You'll learn a lot about my evolution. And hopefully, if you read that, if you're new to crossbows especially, you would read something in there that would say, oh boy, I want to jump ahead of that and not do that. I want to do it some other way. So learn from my mistakes. Buy the book. But the other nice thing about that Zoom meeting is, kind of on that note, I want to hear your crossbow story. I think everybody will have an opportunity on that Zoom meeting to show us your crossbow. And the way Zoom works, we'll all be on the screen at the same time, and I'll be the host, and I'll be able to allow you to talk and then mute you and all that good stuff. And that way you can share your crossbow story with other friends of Bunjie. How cool is that? I think that'd be a lot of fun. So I hope people will take part in that. Just an experiment for Crossbow Appreciation Month. If it bombs and nobody likes this, if it's Zoom bombing, that's actually a term where someone gets on there and interferes with your Zoom. But if it flops, right? Let's say it flops. We'll use that word instead. If it flops, then we will know, right? We won't do it again next year. How's that? So let's go through some of the holy comments. Man, I didn't see all this. I've been watching them a little bit. Michael Berner, thank you very much for the super chat. That's fantastic. You guys are too nice. I'm drinking Kool-Aid out of a gifted cup, and I am enjoying the super chats with you, and I get to talk about all this stuff, and really have been having a really good time. So that's pretty cool. Now we have Chris Kane Outdoors. I'm shooting 520 grains total with my speed. I'm getting 153 foot-pounds of energy. So what is, Mr. Kane, if you could share with us the momentum, I'd be curious to know what that is too. That 153 foot-pounds, that kinetic energy will go up on these calculators at the same time that the momentum goes up. They do go up a little bit, but I think there's ways that they go and ways that they, that kind of stuff. So Jennifer Robinson, no total arrow weight. I was using total arrow weight. It's hard for me to tell sometimes I jump into these things and I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah, sometimes I'm not sure where we're at of these. Where, I'm picking up in the middle of a conversation. Frank Bruner, 500. He already has gone to the calculator. 542 grains here with 207 foot-pounds of energy. I'm curious to know what the momentum is on that, Frank Bruner, but I can bet that you do, in fact, moose. You and Chris Kane both moose. How's that? We got new hunters on here. That's fantastic. Jennifer Robinson. Genevieve needs spinal tap arrows and fixed blade. Read grown-up broadheads. Grown-up broadheads. I don't equipment bash, and when you start saying that some broadheads are grown up and others are not, that's not really my style. But I prefer, and I'm going to retract that and say that I like big broadheads and big cutting diameters, not tiny cutting diameters. My goal, and a goal for crossbow hunters, in my opinion, here's your, you can say that it's not a grown-up broadhead, but it's a beautiful piece of engineering. It really is. The goal for me, for crossbow hunters, is to get this through an animal. That's the goal. The goal is not to put something small through an animal. You can do that easy. I mean, it's obvious that if I took a broadhead shaped like this pen, it'd go through any kind of animal, right? But what good's that going to do me? I want a big cutting diameter. That's what I want. Rage Tripan are good broadheads, Tim Comer. So far, so good on them. I really like them. I'm not going to say 100% that that's where I'm going with it, but, we'll see. Yeah. Eric L. I think that the calculators for compound bows, she has a micro 335. Excalibur only rates at 87 pounds. The micro 335, she has a micro 355. It's a micro suppressor 355. That's what Genevieve's is. Yeah. Good evening, Dual Threat Outdoors. Eric, how are you making out down there? He's been fishing. I know that. The Nocturnals. My nephew uses Nocturnals, I do believe, and I think those are pretty cool. Don't have a problem with that at all. Just an FYI, lever action. The head design will suck up a lot of momentum and kinetic energy. Shot location. These charts are worst case scenario, right? There's no question that this broadhead is part of the reason that I suffered fewer, or that I was successful with fewer pass-throughs. But again, I use smaller broadheads in the past. I've used fixed blade broadheads, and I have used the X-Act, a 3-blade mechanical. And I killed deer with them. That's not a problem. And I used them for years. Those X-Acts I used for 7 years, I think. And I killed a lot of deer and hogs and stuff like that. And I got that broadhead through a hog, a wild boar, a Russian boar, at 30 yards. Complete pass-through. I had to go look for the arrow. Not a problem. There's no question that a broadhead like this slows down that arrow. There's no question that it takes more energy. But when you're talking about crossbows, we got energy to spare. At least most of the people listening to this do. I'm shooting probably one of the slowest crossbows, with the exception of Old Grumpy Hunter, and there's others too. But I'm shooting one of the slowest crossbows out there. With a lot of these modern crossbows, you don't have to worry about whether this goes to the animal. If you make a good shot, if you're anywhere close, it's going to go through, especially this guy. But here's when we talk about, and Jennifer Robinson, I hope you don't take offense, because we're getting closer to the design that you would appreciate with this broadhead, okay? I think. Don't mean to speak for you, but I suspect that point followed by the angle of those blades when opened is an improvement over the angle of these blades. This is the Rage Crossbow Hypodermic, and you can see it doesn't have the steep angle that this one has. So I think, and I totally get what you're talking about there, but I do not have any interest in shooting a fixed blade. I don't have any interest in doing that. I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. I will buy a new crossbow, and I will blow through everything with a 400 feet per second crossbow before I will go back to a fixed blade. That is me, and it's not. I am not trying to pick fights here whatsoever. Everybody should be happy with what they're using. And if you're not, that's when you start needing to look at stuff like that. So, okay, yeah. There are a million arrow momentum and kinetic energy calculators. It would be an interesting endeavor to sit down and go through those various websites and see if they give you the same math. Type in the same numbers, see if you get the same answers. I'm just taking this one because it came up on my phone. I'm not kidding. Like, that's the reason I did it. But it's pretty interesting to see the difference between, and just play around with, well, if I do this, I get this. If I do this, I get this. And that's pretty interesting stuff. It's part of the equation. I don't think this is everything. I don't think so. But I do like to look at other options and sort of weigh them one against the other, that kind of thing. Jennifer Robinson, 412 grain arrows, save Bunjie Jr.'s limbs, bump that weight up to 500 grain plus. She's got room to give on that, but to be honest with you, man, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, but here's the way I'm on that right now. This stuff, and I don't know that you save those limbs. I get where you're coming from, and I don't know about that. I don't know if that's possible. You cock that thing. Well, you've been there. You know what I'm talking about. But those crossbows, man, the tension on those limbs, I don't think it's the same animal as my 10-year-old crossbow. My 10-year-old crossbow, I can cock that thing, carry in a conversation, cock it all day, and just go about my business, shoot it, and everything else. This one is nerve-wracking to me. It's a change for me. In case you haven't noticed, I am not a guy who likes to change things. But this arrow combination, what the manufacturer recommends, the 150 grain broadhead, plus the 16.5-inch arrow. You got to remember, too, she's got vibration dampening equipment on here. It is the suppressor. It's really the 360 crossbow, but it's got all the sound stuff on it, the X shocks and all that. Jennifer and Lever Action and I, we all are on the same page. Don't worry about me on that. We're on the same page about the value of sound dampening equipment versus a heavier arrow. We're on the same page. But right now that stuff's installed. It's working very well for her. The numbers, if we go back and look at her numbers, there's nothing wrong with those numbers. That .642 slugs and 112 foot-pounds of kinetic energy, she's in the moose category, right? She's in the moose category, and she's hoping to shoot deer. You can get away with a lot less than that and kill a whole bunch of deer. Plus, she's staying at 351 feet per second. Nice and flat. The scope is dialed in. I don't want to bump her up to a heavier arrow and replace this little jobby when it's getting the job done, and we can sit in the backyard and she can confidently take shots out to 40 yards, time again. She's a little bit of a little wide group at 40 yards, but it's still right in the ballpark every time. She's killing deer. She's killing everything she shoots at out to 40 yards. So there isn't a problem with that I need to solve at this juncture, okay? And I think that with that vibration dampening equipment on there, that will help save those limbs to the extent possible as well. But man, I'm thinking I'm going to start not just taking her Luminox, but she's going to end up with no broadheads either. I might bump up the broadhead size. But so for the most part, your suggestions are not lost on me, but I'm thinking about that. Yeah. So, where are we at here? Man, these comments, I'll have to go back through and read these too. Raymond Kavanaugh, thanks, Rich. Momentum is a great factor. It's something to look at, that's for sure. I think that you need to look at these things have their relationship in different places of the hunting world, right? Greg Strabrilla, love it, no difference to the moose. I don't think so. No, it's something you would wear as a badge, that slight difference in momentum. But it's, it makes me feel like I'm doing something right. But for the most part, I think if a moose catches one of these, he's not going to be real happy with himself, okay? He's going to sense something is awry with that. Man, that's a mean-looking broadhead. Lancaster Archery has brass inserts. Thank you, Robert Peck. And hello to you. I didn't say hello to you earlier, but I did recognize you're here, and I appreciate that. That is a good point. The brass inserts is another way to do this. I welcome input on that. One of the reasons I'm a little leery of going with a brass insert on an arrow as opposed to the arrow that is crafted with the inserts and all that, like these spinal taps, is arrow integrity, structural integrity. To me, if you take this arrow and install something here and then the broadhead, that's less strong than just having this and then the broadhead. And I'm thinking about that, okay? Thinking about that. Not trying to lead you down one road or another. I'm just throwing that out there. So what is the cut on Genevieve's 150 broadhead? Is it still 2-inch cut or is it more? Chuck Smith. Great question. Believe it or not, it's a 2-inch cut, but with a steeper angle, which I love. But it's the 2-inch cut, and if we hold them up side by side, you can see, and these are going to turn on me here, but that one, and it has murdered its shot collar. But they're the 2-inch cut. They're both a 2-inch cut. If I can show you, there's really no way for me to do this with a webcam, but they're both a 2-inch cut. They are the same cutting diameter, but that is the nature of the beast, right? So, dual thread outdoors. Old Grumpy Hunter is telling me he's getting more text messages from his crossbow is communicating with my crossbow, and they are turning me in on the comment about I'm not here to accommodate Bunjie. Bunjie is here to accommodate me. Yeah, that's not really going to be the theme of season 7, I'm sure. So, lever action. Trump is being sponsored by Maine Hunter. Because it's a Russian arrow. I don't go into the politics on here, of course, but that I think that's funny just because I think about the Russian arrows too. I'm like, am I supposed to be using Russian stuff? You know, so I try not to overplay the Russian part. I talk about how cool the logo is, right? The logo is cool. And maybe the bear on there, I don't know if that is a reference to a Russian bear or something. I think that's pretty cool. So that's pretty neat. But that's a funny comment. Which is brighter, the green or the orange? And I think we're referring there, Jamie, is to the Luminox. I think they are of equal brightness. I've shot different versions of them, and they both seem to show up really well on the camera. At night, LED lights, man, they're just the thing at night. If you're looking for an arrow after dark or at dusk, it's going to stand out. I don't care what brand you buy. They're just bright. I mean, LEDs are just the way to go anymore, man. I mean, you go back 20 years, we didn't have that same kind of availability of that technology. What a difference. What a difference. Bill Russell says Bullwinkle has called. He's getting nervous. Bullwinkle can rest a year. We're not going to be chasing moose this year, but maybe down the road that might happen. It might happen. You never know. Dual Threat Outdoors, however, says that Luminox will never make blue because they say they can't make it bright enough. Well, that's interesting to know. Wow. That's pretty interesting. My recurve crossbow will not match Bunjie, Old Grumpy Hunter. And I know, we've talked about that before. I do realize that I am not the only person on here with an old crossbow. I do realize that. Not lost on me. But it is like one of those things where I don't have, if I'm not using newer technology, I feel like I'm letting down a lot of our viewers. And that's one of the reasons I'm so appreciative of the faster crossbow, so I can talk about those numbers and sort of get my head around hunting with a faster crossbow and the extent to which that sort of adjusts or affects the way that you would do that. Greg Stabrilla, once again, at what yardage? If you are asking me what yardage that we are, that this was at, this is off the tip of the bow. I mean, this is shooting through the chronograph. It's about 1.5 yards away from the end of the crossbow. That's what the numbers that I am getting. So, I don't know if I'm jumping into somebody else's conversation here. I don't know David Grillo, you are correct. I assume these numbers are right off the bow. It only goes down from there, but I think if your arrow starts off at moose, it's safe to say it's in the moose category either way. Unless that moose turns into an elk, okay? And then we got real problems if the elk that I'm shooting at turns into a moose. Then we got some real problems. But, you know, I'm here to moose. Jennifer Robinson makes a good point. Archers are concerned with how far they can hit their target. Bow hunters are concerned with going through their target. Fact. There's a difference to me to being a crossbow hunter and just shooting crossbows in the backyard. There are considerations with that I'm just not going to put a lot of weight on. You know, like I'm not interested in whether I can hit something at 70 yards. That's not this kind of channel. That is not part of my hunting. It's not one of my hunting values, let's say. Jason Patterson, anyone know if you can change collar out and use rage compound broadhead on a crossbow? People do. I don't like that because the ferrule, I'll try and get in the habit of saying it correctly, but the ferrule might be a different size, and I don't think you want to go, if you look at this guy right here, and you can see where the cap busted open here, but I'm going to hold this up here and sort of demonstrate this. My opinion, that if you're, you know, the crossbow arrows are a little thicker. And if you are going from a fatter ferrule, right, where to a narrower shaft, according to Dr. Ashby, you get increased penetration, like 5 or 10% increase in penetration by doing that. But if you go the other way, no. If you've got a fatter arrow with a broadhead on here, and I have some Rage hypodermics for the compound bow that I could share with you and show you this. But that actually means that the top of your insert here is protruding, and it's like a little lip, and that's going to reduce penetration, I think. Again, to me, a lot of this is common sense. It doesn't take a genius to figure out. When I was shooting at animals last year, Sika deer and white-tailed deer, that this broadhead was one of the reasons why I wasn't getting consistent pass-throughs. It's a great broadhead, but it's 2 inches wide. It takes a lot more energy to push something that's 2 inches wide through an animal than it takes to push something that's 1 inch wide through an animal, right? I don't, you know, it doesn't take science to tell me that. It's just common sense. It also doesn't take science. It's just common sense to me that angle is going to go through a deer easier than that angle. You know what I mean? So I'm just throwing that out there. And I am liking those tripans. But I like the rages too. I mean, I killed deer and I got pass-throughs even with my older, slower crossbow. I routinely got pass-throughs. 11 deer or something like that I've shot with the Rage crossbow hypodermic, and pass-throughs on probably, I mean, I'd be guessing, but 8 or 9 of them. But you want a pass-through. Pass-throughs are not only the goal of crossbow hunting, but it is our right as crossbow hunters. We should demand nothing less than a complete pass-through. One of the bow hunting channels I watch, there was a comment by one of the hosts on there that he considered a pass-through if the arrow, as long as it poked through the other side, that was a pass-through. That counts as a pass-through because it's leaving a blood trail on both sides of the animal. That's a pass-through. That doesn't cut it for me. This arrow needs to be laying on the ground, or better yet, protruding from the ground, with the luminoc calling out to me, "Rich, here, come get me. Come and inspect the blood on the arrow." That's what I have to have with crossbow hunting. And I'm not going to accept anything less than that. That's got to be the goal. That's what I want. I don't want the deer running off with arrows sticking out of it and like a flag going down the road. I have seen that on all manner of bow hunting, but that's bow hunting. It's not crossbow hunting. It's not crossbow hunting. This is crossbow hunting. It's supposed to go right through it and bury it in the ground, right? So we're going to get there. We're going to find out a way, because that's part of how you moose. That's how you moose. That is the definition of moosing. Does the arrow go through the animal and stick in the ground? Holy cow, there's so many comments. I have to go through and read these later. It is now 8 o'clock, and I don't want to take up all your time. I have talked an awful lot. I'm going to drink some more of my Kool-Aid here, and I am going to go watch this broadhead. I'm going to go watch this broadhead. I'm going to go watch this live stream and read the comments and I'll try to respond to them. On here, I can't go through and respond to yours, but I shall read them. And then what I will do is incorporate the comments into future videos. I ask that if you have comments, please leave them under this video in the comments section here, and I will go back and respond to them, because I learn from this stuff as much as you do when we share this information. This is the nature of archery, right? It's just one of those things where we share it online. That's how we learn this stuff. And I got a kick out of this. I really do. This is a developing topic for me, a developing subject that has really piqued my interest, and thanks in part to a few friends of Bunjie who know exactly who they are. There are several of you, and especially our meet and greeters. I saw Dave on here. We got Jennifer and Lever Action on here. I really appreciate you guys joining us, and I just think it's awesome that you guys have seen fit to come on here and take part in this tonight and share your information with me. I can't wait to see where this goes. I can't wait for the hunting seasons, but it's going to be here sooner than we think, huh? It is. And this week on Death by Bunjie, you'll get the meet and greet videos. They'll be up, and I hope you appreciate them as much as I do. Look out for Thursday. That'll probably be our premiere, so we'll look for that then. Sign up for the email newsletter, and until next time, I am going to type something in here, as I usually do. You guys are beating me to it. But I bet I beat you with the number of exclamation points. How's that? I put more exclamation points on it. Thanks, you guys. Seriously. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining on here. I can't wait to read your comments. This will be good stuff. Until next time, all hail Bunjie and Bunjie Jr. Have a great week.